Okay, so we're live. We're going to have Tim Densham from Catastrophe Games here in a minute, but Tim is having some technical difficulties. So you may get to see some live StreamYard troubleshooting happening here in real time. So just pulling over into oh, give me a second here. We're doing some work. All right. So let's hope that we can get this happening. So I appreciate the patience of anyone watching at this time, which there are some people. So my apologies. All right, so we should have Tim on at some point really soon. So in the meantime, I would like to say thank you. I just finished sticking food in my face here, so if I belch or something like that, that's why. Live TV, nothing like live TV. So Tim is moving to, hey, ID Jesters, Mike Anthony, and Hans Gilling. Thanks for stopping by. We do have a few people here. We did have some kind of problem with the links before. So what I think happened is I had all the links set up, all the sessions set up correctly, and then when I signed into StreamYard to do the previous interview with the Song for War folks, and please do check that video out. I think YouTube connected me to the wrong session. So I had the wrong session live. So if you have a link that's bad, I think that's why I'm blaming YouTube in this particular case. So we're still trying to get Tim. We're working hard behind the vast team behind the scenes here is happening. So it's pretty cold. Fast Hines, thanks for stopping by. It's pretty chilly here too. It was like 25 degrees when I went out this morning for breakfast. So we're still working on getting Tim here. Massive team behind the scenes, meaning it's just me. So yes, Mike Anthony, you're absolutely right. We should absolutely call this The Price is Right. And we were running a little bit late as well, so that's why. Tim, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can, in fact, hear you. It sounds like you are talking through a sock, but I can hear you. So this is better than what we were getting before.
Well, that's an improvement. I'm still looking around to see if I can get some video. I had to switch computers, so I may be digging. So if you hear sounds in the background, it looks like someone shuffling through a box full of stuff. That's because I'm shuffling through a box full of stuff.
Okay, not a problem. Let me see if I can up your volume a little bit. I think I can. Let's try that. Okay, so welcome Tim to the show. We're gonna do an interview here. We'll probably go about 90 minutes, maybe a little bit less. Depends what fun stuff we have to talk about. I'm gonna put a banner up here so that I fixed this before and it didn't take for some reason. So let me fix it again. StreamYard's, you know, I gave up on Restream specifically because StreamYard was a lot less problems, and today I've had a lot of problems with StreamYard.
So it's not just me. I'm not the jinx.
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
All right. Here we could check out the Catastrophe Games website at catastrophegames.net. No periods. So let me share this and then I'll start grilling Tim about stuff that we can find on the Columbia Games website. So when I search here, when I look at Shop All, I do see some products from other publishers as well.
Correct.
And that's CSL, which is I think Conflict Simulations Limited,
Yep.
and not sure who else is in here, but we've got some stuff from Catastrophe Games as well. So let's start by telling us a little bit about yourself and Catastrophe Games.
All right. Well, Catastrophe Games, we started a couple years ago, looking to go into a niche of historical. I say historical, I don't say war games. You can see Stonewall Uprising right there. You'd really have to stretch to find a way to make that into a war game. So I like the history of it. The niche that I think that it looked like an opportunity to go into, or at least something that I was interested in, was light historical games, games that go fast, and games that allow you to get a look at the history without having to be just bombarded with some of the requirements, some of the heavy requirements that a lot of the other games have. In my life, I started off gaming. The first war game I played was when my brother gave me Squad Leader when I was 12. I loved that game. I played that game to death. I grew up in a farm south of Battle Creek, Michigan. So if it gives you an example of how isolated that was, we get really excited to go to Battle Creek. And I'm going to guess most of the people listening here probably have no idea where Battle Creek is. So if that gives you an indication of just how out in the sticks I was about as sticky as you could get.
I know where Michigan is.
Yeah, see, there you go.
So that's halfway there, right?
Yeah, that's got to be it.
I could get to Detroit without looking at a map if I had to, I think.
Yeah. So with that, then, I really enjoyed Squad Leader, but I never got a chance to play with anybody because it was just too complex for the people that I was around. So what I ended up having to do was switch to like simpler games, and then Dungeons and Dragons took over my life. I joined the Marine Corps, and I really didn't have a chance to play games until after I came back from Afghanistan. And really got into a game group again. And I never thought I would get into historical or war games at all until someone threw Conflict of Heroes at me. And Matt, a guy from our Grand Rapids group, just gave that to me. And so I looked at it thinking, well, I just don't have time for this. But Conflict of Heroes is a different kind of game. You can get into that game and start playing it really fast. And it gave me the same kind of feeling of being able to maneuver units that I had sometimes with Squad Leader without a lot of the extra, headspace required to be able to grok all the rules that Squad Leader has. So that brought me back in again. So I started playing Academy game stuff. Then I got a chance to try out 1775 and the whole Birth of series and really loved that. And never thought I would get into publishing at all. And then this strange occurrence, like if I were to describe both my military career and my game publishing career, absolutely none of it was planned out. It was like there was no way anybody could have looked at point A and figured out I'd end up where I was today. I happened to have this long trip to go to Ravenna, Ohio, and I was from South. Yeah. So you know Ravenna, Ohio?
I do know where Ravenna is.
Yeah. It makes Battle Creek look exciting. Let's just put it that
does.
way. So I was looking at this trip.
It's the Circleville of Chillicothe.
I asked everybody in the unit, hey, we got to go to this training event. Someone from the unit needs to go. And they all had something else to do, and they all didn't want to make eye contact with me. I'm like, okay, I get it. I understand. So I said, I'll be the guy that goes down there. to go to this training, which is a 4.5-hour drive for me through the most unexciting terrain on the planet. And so I was like, what on earth am I going to do to make this trip interesting? So I dimly remember that Academy Games was in Fremont, Ohio, and I looked that up, and well, that's just right on the way. So I called up the number and got Uwe Eichert. Never had any contact. He had no idea what I was about to experience. And I said, well, is there anything going on there? Like, because I'll be there tonight. Oh yeah, you need to stop by. We've got a 80,000 square foot manufacturing complex. We've got a fountain up front. We got dolphins. You need to swing by.
Boy, that sounds like Uwe, doesn't it?
And I'm like, this guy's a nut, but you know what? My kind of nut. So I swung by, and I was really worried because I thought, this is one of the premier war game companies in the world, and here I am. I'm going to stop in here unannounced, and I'm like, I got to really amp up the game. And I walk in, and they're not play testing anything. They're playing El Grande. I'm like, well, El Grande's fun. So we start drinking. I'm playing El Grande and had a good time. But then after that, I sat there and talked to Uwe about Conflict of Heroes and tactics and different ways that it works out, and how I thought that was a better military simulation for guys on the ground because it had the cards, it had that fog of war. And as a rifle platoon leader, I realized very quickly it wasn't squad leader. Squad leader, it's like mathematical. You can figure out where everything is going to go. And then as a platoon leader, there's like bullets start going off, and I'm like, well, crap, where is everybody? And I'm looking around, and I just see the guys to my left and my right, and I know I'm only seeing like a third of my platoon, and it was not the squad leader experience. So the fact that Conflict of Heroes added the cards to it, I really like that. It added fog of war that just wasn't there. And so I think if you look at like the game designs that I'm most interested in, there's always a little bit of fog of war, because that to me was like the thing that's missing on a lot of simulations and a lot of history, is that people are making decisions as best they can, not necessarily with perfect intelligence. It's rare that they get even close to that. So they're doing the best they can with the information that they've got in front of them.
So what was the first game that you released as Catastrophe Games?
That was The Landing, Gallipoli, 1915, by Joe Schmidt. And we're actually working on another game with Joe. And this is what I would say is more of a game experience. It is day one of the Anzac landing at Gallipoli, which historically was a royal mess. They landed a mile off from where they thought they were going to land, and they did not have the maps for where they were landing. And so the way Joe modeled that in the game is the cards that you lay out, you're laying out your terrain, but you only lay out the terrain one at a time. So if you advance onto a piece of terrain, only then can you go and find out what the next card is as you go through a gully or you go through a hill. The most of them, as you can see there, that's the way it starts. The rest of those cards are hidden until you fight your way through the last card. And maybe there's Turks there, maybe there's not. And maybe the biggest drama that you're going to have there is just trying to figure out how to get across the next terrain. And it's so difficult for your team that's your biggest fight, is just to try to figure that one out. It's a quick game, 15, 20 minutes. Don't expect to win. I think it played it 21 times before I had my first win while we were play testing, and that seems to be par for the course. But people seem to like it, and folks keep ordering it. So I'm trying to go, and we're working on another version. Joe's taking that same system, and he's applying it towards Teddy Roosevelt Rough Riders. In fact, he won Charles Roberts Award, I think, for the amateur category last year.
Oh yeah, that's right. Nobody that I talked to knew very much about that, actually.
And congrats to Joe for for putting that out there. It's an unusual category, but we're going back and forth right now. And this is part of the thing about being a game publisher that I just love, is that Joe and I spent an hour discussing Teddy Roosevelt's role on the attack, because there's actually two hills in what we call, San Juan Hill. The first attack, the hardest attack, was on I forgot what the hill's name, but that was the most difficult one, and Roosevelt was on the lead on that. The only guy in a horse leading an attack up the hill and doesn't get killed. Just how he managed to do that is beyond me. But somehow he gets on top of there. San Juan Hill is actually being attacked by the infantry, and they do most of the attack and clear out most of the defenders. And then Teddy Roosevelt decides to come in with his troops to come in and attack. And so did he attack San Juan Hill? Yes. Was he the responsible one for winning the victory on that particular hill? I would argue no. The infantry already did that job. But anyhow, that's the kind of fun as a publisher, working with the designers to try to make sure that we're tweaking the rules so that they match the history, and people can, they can learn more if they want to, but we're at least giving them an exposure to the history as we understand it through the game form.
So did you start out with the print-on-demand model immediately once you guys got rolling with this first title?
Well, so how I got started with publishing is I had an idea for my first game, Zermatt, which we will be shipping hopefully fairly soon, as soon as I can get the card art finished to drive-through cards satisfaction.
We've already had some people in the chat saying that they're looking forward to it very much, and some folks that I've talked to who got to play it at either Origins or wherever else have had good things to say about Zermatt as well.
Yeah,
just to get that out there.
I am really looking forward to it as well, because this has been a monkey on my back for a while trying to get this game out. So I had this neat game, and I think it would do well, and so I talked to Uwe, and Uwe was interested in it, but Academy Games has got such a backlog that even though I was working as a part-time as an operations manager for them, it was going to be forever before that game would ever see the light of day there. So finally I got to the point where I really needed to either work for Academy Games full-time or you'd have to hire someone else. And I was doing it part-time. My day job is I work for the Army National Guard. I'm an exercise scenario planner for a big exercise called Northern Strike. And let's just put it this way. The Army pays a lot better than publishing board games.
I'll buy that.
Probably a good thing that you're sitting down so that you weren't floored by that. But I couldn't, I just couldn't, for my family, go and take that plunge. But I was able to look into what the publishing world was like through working with Uwe. And so I said, I think maybe if I did my own publishing company, maybe I could get my own game out. Well, anyhow, so it took a while. I looked at all the different ways of doing that. And one of the things that I saw was just so painful is fulfillment. We ended up doing the Vikings campaign for Uwe's 878 Vikings, and huge campaign, close to $1 million. And so there was I was working a lot toward figuring out the fulfillment for that. And it was just how daunting that is to try to get that accomplished. And I recognize right off the bat, I don't want to get involved in that. I mean, you have to be to some degree, but I knew I couldn't handle all that as the regular model. So that was one of the things that was holding me back. And then as I was going through and I was exploring different ways to print the game, I found out about Blue Panther. And I thought, well, let me check this out. And I looked at the Hollenspiel model and, some of the other game companies there. And I'm like, these folks are making it working through Blue Panther. And I did the quotes and what it costs to print a game in China versus what it costs to print through Blue Panther. I love Steve to death, but there's a huge difference, like a multi factor there between those two costs. But the reason why I went with Steve, number one, I'm not a big fan of China, as far as what they do as a nation. So there's that. And number two, there's a lot of hidden costs by printing in China. So the cost of shipping, and not only the I'm shelling out shekels here to pay for that, but there's the additional cost and time to try to sort all that stuff out and get all the documentation right and figure out where it's going to go. And then you have another bunch of costs too. So if you want to sell more games than what you had in the Kickstarter, let's say, I think like Zermatt had like 150 orders, something like that, 125, 150 orders, with some of the stuff with Second Chance Games in there. Well, so let's say I want to make more than that. So I'm making 200 copies of that game. The regular distribution model would be then that I would have to go and have that go to a distributor, and if they don't sell it, then they're going to start charging me a floor price to keep it there. And then I have to figure out I have to manage the inventory at these different locations, and that's a lot of work, right? And for the type of these games, we're not that big. So to go and start managing that, I would be like forever behind as far as finances just to go maintain the distribution. Whereas having Steve print it and ship it, I don't have inventory. I don't have to worry about, bringing import and export into here. It's just so much simpler. I really don't think I could print a game any other way with the time that I have without using Blue Panther, to be honest. So I really owe the company to Steve because he's created the opportunity to create, whatever Catastrophe Games is.
Yeah, for a number of smaller publishers in this space, war games and non-war games, really, between Catastrophe Games, and of course we have Hollandspiel, which I think we've probably all heard of at this point. We've got White Dog Games, which publishes through Blue Panther. CSL publishes through Blue Panther, and there's at least one that I'm forgetting. So,
Yep. Shoots Games. They were the ones that got started. That's where I looked at that and said, "Wow, there's an opportunity to go create games to them." So anyhow, that's how I made the decision to go use Blue Panther and get into the whole publishing business.
Now, how many games has Catastrophe Games done at this point?
So we have 3 that are available for purchase: Gallipoli, Judean Hammer, and USS Laffey. And hopefully soon we'll have Zermatt on there.
And you had Kickstarters for you did have a Kickstarter for Zermatt, correct?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Okay, and I think there was one for USS Laffey as well.
Correct.
Which was a destroyer that was being hit by kamikazes?
Yes.
Am I right about that?
Yeah. So the designer, Mike Hyman, also another former Marine. So the two of us got invited to go out to the USS Laffey at Patriots Point, South Carolina, and we spent a week there working on the Laffey last year in April, and it was a great experience. The Laffey was on picket duty outside of Okinawa and got hit by 22 Japanese aircraft. That's a combination between kamikazes and bomb strikes and so on. They were attacked by that many. Not every single one hit, but they were able to destroy a few of them. But it was just an amazing case of damage control, and that's what the Laffey, this game is. It's a roll and write game. So each time you roll the dice, you assign them. Hopefully you get the numbers you want to the different options, like fix some things or attack a plane or help the captain do whatever the captain's working on. And but it's like relentless that in the center there you got the Japanese flag, and that around it is all the Japanese planes, and you have to work your way through all of them and survive. So it's a really interesting game, a different take on that. Again, once you kind of grok the rules and like read through the rules or watch a video and things, you can just click your way through that game quickly, and there's hardly a lot of any rule looking into once you get going. So really interesting game.
So sounds like an interesting example, actually, of fitting a very non-war game type of mechanic into a military history topic. I think that's alone makes it sound pretty interesting. I think the roll and write mechanic, for those who don't know, is, I don't know if I'd call it a Euro mechanic or not, but it's well, you roll dice and you write the numbers down somewhere, and then you do something with those numbers, right? This is a whole field of games that
Yes.
Very dissimilar from what we see in the traditional wargaming hex encounter space. So, and
what's
then
interesting is trying to as I've talked to other gamers, I was surprised by how many times to war gamers I had to explain the concept of what a roll and write was, because that's just not something that they're familiar with. So it was just very interesting to me, because I probably live half in the historical war game realm and half in the I guess Euro or generic other realm, and so it was just interesting to me how many people had never even heard of a roll and write. And as you said, I mean, that's a whole field of games that are out there. I mean, there are some people out there that will play roll and writes almost exclusively, and it's just kind of interesting to understand just how fractioned the game world is now. Back when I started playing games and buying games in high school, it was
oh
a
boy,
game.
Tim is being devoured by werewolves even as we speak.
No, I think Amazon just delivered something, and my beast is letting me know that.
It's that shifty Amazon driver.
Yeah, he does a good job with his role of whooping.
Well, that's the dog's job. When I have one of my shifty wargaming buddies over and the dog starts barking at her, I start shushing the dog. My wife's like, "Don't do that. That's what she's supposed to do."
Yep. So it's just interesting to me how when I first started off, everybody played the same games, and it was whatever Avalon Hill had and whatever SBI had, because that was the only choices we had. And now it's so much different than that. That people can get completely lost in their little world of board gaming, that they're not even aware of, all the other aspects that are out there. So I guess yay for us, but at the same time, we also are so focused in our little groups that we don't get a chance to see, unless you go to conventions, like you go to an Origins or a Gen Con or something like that. Then you're forced to see, like, wow, somebody really likes miniatures. They've made all of Beirut at a 1-to-1 scale on this table, and they're fighting this for the entire weekend. That's amazing, and you wouldn't know that if you just stuck to your own little world and that bought the games that you're familiar with.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, I think we've all observed the phenomenon of the migration of the more serious wargamers, the more self-described serious wargamers, away from the big multi-genre type of events like your Gen Cons and your Origins, and more towards their more focused events like your Console World Expos, but also your WBC, which has a lot of war games, but also has a lot of miscellaneous stuff. Some of which is super old Avalon Hill stuff too. There's tournaments for tons of old Avalon Hill games there. So tell me about Judean Hammer, because when I looked at the website, and this was back before Origins actually, because we did say hello at Origins. If you don't remember, because I barely remember at that point, I was in a haze. Judean Hammer was the thing that topically reached out to me specifically, because because the Maccabean Revolt is an interesting corner of history that I'm unaware of any other games on.
Yes, well, to be honest, I didn't know anything about it either. As Joe brought Robin over, and this is just after we finished our Kickstarter for Joe's game, and he says, this guy here might be interested in too, because he's got this game that might fit your, less than 2 hours and fast to learn historical game thing. So I said, well, try it. So we went on Tabletopia and played it. I didn't know anything about the history, but I played the game and loved the mechanics. So I said, all right, I was ready to offer him a contract. I think I might have just offered him a contract that night because I was just so in love with the game. The thing that so intrigued me about it is, so it's a coin game, it's counterinsurgency, but it's an ancient coin game. In fact, if you want to look at the map there, the Maccabean player starts in that green area centered around the town of Modin, and their goal is they want to try to get, for the most part, they want to get Jerusalem back. But the Greeks in their army, they control Jerusalem in the beginning, and they have all those white supply centers on the outskirts. So everybody's trying to fight for these different colored regions in of course Jerusalem, but everybody has one deck. So most of the counterinsurgencies, or most war games, everyone has their own deck that's tuned to them. But this one, it's a single deck, and then the genius that Robin put into this game is half the deck is our cards for the Maccabeans, and half the deck is for the Greeks. But when you play a card, you can play it for its operations value, which is pretty standard type coin mechanic. The event, though, you can only play if the card is for you. And if you play the event, then the card is destroyed. So the one deck that you share, when you play an event, it goes away. Now, collectively, you have a smaller deck. And the other thing that I thought was brilliant about that is not only do you use that card for your operations and movement, but then you use the deck, you flip it over, and that card at the bottom also has a combat ability. So if it's your card, for the most part, it's going to give you a bonus for combat. So by playing that event card, which is this really cool one-time situation, you also burn off some of your combat ability. So you get into an interesting situation where somebody plays too many cards in the beginning, and the other player can just wait them out. Then they've got a pretty good chance of like having one unit go against three and potentially winning that, because the other guys burn the deck down so much that the odds are in favor of you winning, even if you've got a smaller number of units. So I thought that was a fascinating approach to limiting the deck and making some really tough decisions for the players as they work through that. And the other key part to this is the Greeks start off with more regions and more troops on the map, but they have to be very careful at the end of playing the 4-card turns. They have to be able to supply all their units. They have to be able to trace a line of supply back to the Greek supply centers on the edges, and if they don't, they start losing units. And you can't do it right off the bat, but through careful play, the Jewish player can maneuver the Greeks into a situation where they're stuck, and they're desperately trying to keep their supply lines going, and momentum shifts then at that point. Hopefully, for the Greek player, hopefully they built enough of a victory point advantage because they're about to start getting crushed by the revolt.
So I wish we would have had had a chance to get the designer on, because I'd love to talk about sources for something like this. Actually, I'm not even sure who you'd go to as a source for this particular historical situation.
Oh yeah, I learned a lot. Just like probably everybody else. Your first stop is you go on Wikipedia to learn about stuff, and then you dive into there to some other works to try to go and proof it, verify it. Does it look like it's the information here is lining up? Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know for sure where he got all of his information from. He did put some interesting sources there. I read one of the books, and yeah, it's just eye-opening for me. I had no idea about any of this conflict, to be honest. So it's just fascinating to explore this, and then it was fascinating for me to find out about how the whole mechanics that he put together here for a counterinsurgency, how they all worked, and they seem to work for making generally a very tense game.
Yeah, that's it looks really interesting. Achilles here is asking a question in the YouTube chat that I'm going to try and answer, and then Tim, I'll let you have an answer if you want. He's asking whether the U-boat games, the Hunters and the Hunted, and the whole genre particularly shared DNA with roll and write genre. So I think the answer to that is probably no. Those games kind of trace a lineage back to at least to the progenitor of that type of solitaire experience, which is Avalon Hill's B-17 Queen of the Skies. I don't know what the predecessors of B-17 Queen of the Skies might be. I can see why that is a question, though. Roll and write is kind of its own thing, and I'm thinking that it's a newer phenomenon than like the narrative focused war games. But then again, I'm talking inside the field of hobby games, and sometimes these ideas turn up outside the field of hobby games in general games and then show up in hobby games years later. And that may well have happened with the roll and write mechanic. Shut Up and Play has best roll and write games. If you're genuinely curious about the genre of roll and write games, and there are some examples that I thought looked kind of interesting, actually. Check out Shut Up and Play. They're a channel that's much, much bigger than the entire wargaming YouTube ecosystem put together, but they have a pretty good video on best roll and write games, so check that out. Tim, do you have anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I think that was a great description there. Roll and write, for the most part, is you've got a pad of paper that's in front of you. You're going to roll the dice. You're going to assign what you've got, some limited ability. Usually, depending on how the mechanics of the game work, you can re-roll some of the dice. And then at some point, you're just stuck with what the results that you got. And then after that, you assign the mechanics of what that means. For example, in our game, in the Laffey, you roll to find out where the Japanese planes are attacking, which half of the ship and which compartment of the ship. And then you start assigning the damage there, and you assign it by marking off basically like the hit points of that compartment. And one of the more interesting mechanics there is some of the aircraft, if it was like a torpedo attack, then a lot of the hits that they're going to provide are going to be leaks. So then you don't just fill in the hit point of that you lost the hit point. You show that there's an ongoing leak here, and then at the end of each turn, if you have an ongoing leak or an ongoing fire, the damage continues and spreads. Meaning if you can't just ignore a problem, you have to go and deal with it. And so that's and then you're hoping then the next turn when you roll that you can get some opportunity to send some damage crews in there and fix the leak or put out the fire or somehow manipulate the situation. And then at the end, you're going to be crossing off crossing out the leaks if you put the leaks out, crossing out the fires if you put the fires out. And so you're basically kind of keeping score. That's kind of the point to the roll and write, is you're keeping score on the pad to show how the effects of all these cumulative dice rolls and what they mean towards the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mike Anthony calls Yahtzee a roll and write game, and I think there's some truth to that. I think the roll and write games I've seen are a little more complicated than Yahtzee, but not by a ton, right? But I think the idea is right, that you have a set of numbers that in Yahtzee's case you're rolling on dice, and I'm not the expert on this, by the way. You're rolling a set of numbers and you're filling in the options, and you're trying to fill the entire checklist off. In this case, it kind of sounds like in the case of the Laffey game, maybe you don't want the whole list to get checked off, because then the boat sinks.
You do not want that. That would be bad. But Mike's exactly right. They share that lineage from Yahtzee, but it's all on how you put the theme on there. And so if you can conceive of changing those rules and the results and manipulating that and putting some different mechanics on there, you end up instead of Yahtzee, you end up with the Laffey, and you're trying to keep a destroyer alive in Okinawa in 1945.
Yeah, it looks neat as well. So what else is in the pipeline for you after Zermatt comes out? Or is that something you're not ready to talk about yet?
Oh no, I got plenty of things in the pipeline that we're working on. Yeah, if I can get my cards right, Zermatt, that's our highest priority, is getting that game out. I've got a follow-on for that called Sadr City. So Zermatt is counterinsurgency at the smallest scale in rural Afghanistan. And Sadr City, I thought I would take a different take on that, using mostly the same mechanics, but applying that to Iraq in Baghdad. So now this is an urban counterinsurgency. One of the highlights of Zermatt is you've got 4-inch tiles that you're building the district before the game begins. With Sadr City, you're doing the same thing, but Zermatt, with those tiles, you can create like this strange looking area when you put all those tiles together. There's an example of what those tiles are. You put out 11 of them and you create a district. Doing the same thing with the urban environment, but instead Sadr City, if you look at the Google Maps, it is a very planned, like Soviet style block that, there are crossroads in and out of there, and it turns into a very distinct rectangular shaped apartment complex. So completely different than what Zermatt is. So you don't have a choice on what the shape is. It's going to be a square when you get done. But what's interesting with that then is I took a look at the opportunity. The line of rows that are closest toward the center, towards the green zone, are aligned more closely towards the Iraqi government, and the ones that are furthest away are tied to the Mahdi insurgency. And so then I made the victory point values for each of those different. So now you have a reason to try to go away from your home area, because you can get a lot more points if you can convert the other guy's tiles and his city blocks to your cause. If we keep getting the positive response that we're getting from Zermatt, then I will be. I've actually play tested a lot of Sadr City, so I just need to get into the thing that slows me down the most, and that is getting the art together and start working on that piece. So there's Sadr City. Way down the road, if they're still interested in this system, I'm putting some rough ideas together for the third and who knows, probably final version of this, and that is Syria, northern Syria, where this will be a multiplayer with the principal antagonist being the Turks and the Kurds. But the other two playable factions then are going to be the NGOs, so like Medicine Sans Frontiers, Doctors Without Borders. They might be an organization like that. It would be playable. And then the fourth faction would be throwing ISIS in there. And all they want to do is just kill people. So you have the regular conflict going on back and forth between the Kurds and the Turks, but you're also going to have the NGOs who are trying to, win over the non-aligned peoples, and in each of the villages, and then you've got ISIS out there just doing their best to be the worst of humanity. So that's way down the road on those lines. As far as the stuff probably closer, there's the San Juan Hill, basically a follow-on to the landing, Gallipoli. There's a couple, there's probably 2 or 3 versions of the rules for Judean Hammer, which we're calling that family Conflict of Wills. And with that, we're looking at one of the games is the civil war that occurred in Saudi Arabia after World War I. They actually created Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis will be one of the factions that are fighting for control, back and forth there. That's really interesting. Robin, the designer of Judean Hammer, is working on a game that is the conflict between the natives of the Philippines and the United States at the turn of the last century.
Where Blackjack Pershing was one of the primary figures.
Oh, there's a lot of really interesting figures that will show up later on in our history that Americans are more familiar with, but a lot of them got their teeth into conflict from the what we call the insurrection in the Philippines.
Got their hands pretty dirty too.
Yes. Yep. So and that's one I don't. There may be a game out there, probably some magazine game a million years ago, but I don't think there's been a lot of people who've covered that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that one. And then I'm taking that system and I'm trying to apply that to the entire modern war in Afghanistan from 2001 to apparently 2021, and using that same, warping that system a little bit to apply that to Afghanistan.
Well, you're definitely, as a publisher here, and you can speak to if this is purposeful or not. I have to think that it is. While there's a couple things that you have here in the lineup that I've seen other games for, the USS Laffey situation, for example, there's a game called Picket Duty that's kind of that situation, and I suspect, although I don't have the game, so I don't know if the USS Laffey was the specific inspiration, but it's exactly that kind of thing. It's the naval battle of Guadalcanal, and you're on a destroyer or PT boat or whatever it is, and you're getting attacked by swarms of Japanese planes and kamikazes. But otherwise, a lot of these are relative. I mean, and there's not really that many games that take place in Afghanistan at this point, because frankly, I think it's still a pretty sensitive subject, and it's, I mean, really still going on. Even if the U.S. has pulled out. So, and who knows how that's going to play out. But the Maccabean revolt and that revolt in the Philippines, I would not necessarily bet money that there's no games on those subjects, but I can't think of any.
Right. Yep. Well, you mean if the question is like where the direction is for some of these things?
Yeah. I mean, to what extent are you intentionally selecting topics that have seen historical topics that have seen very little coverage elsewhere in the hobby?
All right. Well, I'll let you in on the secret. Here's the secret. I basically, as a publisher, I'm cheating. So the first game, The Landing and Laffey, both of those games were on BGG contests, and won contests on there. And I looked at the results and what people, because people voted them as I like this part, I like that part. There was a lot of interest already in the games, and had a lot of positive buzz on that. And I really cheated with the Laffey because for the most part, Mike did almost all the graphics for it because he had the game already lined up. So because art is such a painful thing for me, I looked at that and like, if Mike is willing to work with me on this, then I can get this game out pretty quick. So if it fit in my requirements that I wanted to be a game that's less than 2 hours long and you can learn the rules fast and is historical, and to be honest, it'd be a game that I thought would be fun. If I didn't think that would be fun to play, I didn't want to publish it. And that has caused some conflict in some of the games, like the designer for Stonewall. He purposely, that could have been a game. A lot of people have given him grief for that because it's a 2-player game, looking at both sides of the civil rights movement there. But he says he wanted to have a game. He didn't want to have just a exploration. So he wanted to go in there and set up something that he thought would be interesting for both sides to play. And so working with that, he created a game that shows both sides of that. And so with that, that's one of the design decisions that he has. He wanted to have a game that he thought would be fun to play. That, both sides want to fight hard to try to win, and you have that conflict going back and forth. And that's that kind of interesting thing that most of us doing historical games or war games, they want to see that. They don't want to just do something. You play a game to try to win, right? So that's why I played Gallipoli 20 plus times, because I want to make sure I could actually win the bloody game. But so that's one of the requirements that I've got there. Is it's got to be fun. It's got to be something that you just don't do once, like, yeah, that was an interesting experience, and then set it away. When you do something like that, that was neat, I would recommend this to someone else. If they get a chance to play it, go ahead and play it. That's kind of one of the design philosophies that we have there. So I keep a lookout for that. Other things that I am working on, I've got a game called True Command that is a much more traditional hex and counter style board game. It's a step up from On the Ground. It's probably not a tactical system. It's probably borderline operational system. I'm setting it up in the first game. It's going to be Eastern Front, World War II, and I know everybody and their brothers got Eastern Front and World War II, right?
We're just talking about all these novel topics that should come up with.
I know. So I'm going to break the bubble there. But what I thought was interesting is I do a lot of exercises at like battalion, brigade, and division level, with that, the thing that I noticed from the training perspective is that a lot of the officers and senior NCOs, they don't play enough war games, right? So they don't have the experience of being able to go in there and fight. They're up here. So I have seen some of the training things where people will go out there and they'll like Sebastian Bay is working real hard with his system, the Fleet Marine Force game, to go out there and provide that so that people can start to get those experiences and get those reps in by playing these games. So they don't have to do it in real life, right? That they've got the experience of trying to figure out, given a tactical problem, how am I going to go and solve it? But many of those games that are out there right now, that if you look at some of the traditional war games, they're just so hard, because to get anybody else that's not a super dedicated war gamer to go and do that, because here's your rule book, it's 50 pages long. Well, you just lost most people with that, right? They're just not going to do that. Or even if you go and say, well, you can do it on a computer, and you set it up on a computer, then you have to have a network, you got codes back and forth. I really like to try to look at like what it's like to be, say, a division commander, and you're trying to go and fight against another division commander on the ground. So I picked the Eastern Front because I figured that'd be a good place to start. And I call it True Command because if you look at it, I'm probably going to offend some people here. If you look at many of the traditional war games, an Eastern Front game has like 400 counters from, St. Petersburg all the way down there to Grozny, right? And that's fun. And I'm not taking away that there's a million other games that are just like that, and go buy those, right? Heck, look on the website. CSL has a bunch of those. Go buy it from me. That'll be great. I get $1 or $2 every time you buy from me. But the thing is, from my sense, from what I've seen, the experience that a commander has when they're working on that is you manage 2 to 6 subordinate commanders. You're not managing 200. So the Western Front, Stalin, or the Eastern Front, Stalin had like 3 or 4 army commanders that he was giving orders to, and threatening to shoot them. On the other side, he
only shot a couple.
1,000.
Well, I'm talking during the actual war.
Yeah, all right. Maybe directly he only
kind of stopped shooting that many people after a while. And then he resumed after the war. But
and on the other side, Hitler had Army Group North, Army Group South, Army Group Center, so basically he had 3 commanders out there. Right?
Don't think none of them ever got shot either.
There's that too, right? It's one of the reasons why Eastern Front is so interesting, because you can fight these really interesting tactical battles, but you don't really care that much because both sides are evil. Anyhow, as you're looking at that though, and you're looking at the fight, when they were looking at what the commander's decisions are, they're giving decisions out to another commander, but only so many of those commanders. So you're not really out there giving commands out to a million people. And the other part that most games don't have is one of the reasons why these different organizations do so well is because they have staffs that are helping them out. There's a whole command and staff system. So what I did with True Command is you've got like 4 or 5 units you're moving on the map. They're cubes, so until you bump into each other, you don't know exactly what the units are. You got scouts to go out there and try to mitigate some of that, and that play is important too. You've also got a staff action where you can pull out a staff cube from a bag, and it looks like I'm getting the G4, which is logistics, to say, okay, then it looks like I'm going to get some extra logistics. So I can either use that immediately, or I can start to put that into a plan to start to build like this thing I want to have happen down the road to use against the other guy that they can't see because they don't have perfect intelligence. So a lot of fog of war built into that as you try to maneuver. In fact, the first thing that you do in that game is you draw your mission. The mission tells you which one of the 3 missions that you've been given by whoever your higher headquarters is. And then that tells you what your order of battle is. So you don't know going in what your order of battle is. It's not a major change. You might get an additional like light infantry, or you might find that you have a smaller objective you have. Instead of getting all the bridges, you might only have to capture 1 bridge. And so one of your units starts out at half strength. The other guy doesn't know that, though. It doesn't know what you've got, and you don't know what their objective is. And you might figure that out by, as you bump into each other, how hard they're fighting for these different bridges, or how easily they give that away. Or maybe you can, by fighting, you get a chance to figure out what their order of battle is after a while. But it might be mid-game before both sides really start to figure out what the other guy's objectives are, which is what real life is like. No general starts out knowing that the other guy needs to get hex 04558. I mean, that's just not real life. So I built that into the game. That's also built into the Zermatt as well. That you start off the game by trying to find out what your objective is that the other guy probably won't find out until the very end of the game.
That sounds fairly interesting. That does sound like a little bit of a new take on familiar topic, but sometimes that's why familiar topics are chosen to experiment with. It's the mechanics that the innovation is happening in, and not necessarily the topic. The East Front is very well understood by wargamers. I think that's safe to say, and folks will find. This does sound weird to say that wargamers will find the East Front a comfortable choice of topic, right?
Yes. Yep.
So maybe you have a little more ability to be novel with the mechanics than you would if you also picked a novel topic. I think that's one reason why to speak to back to the more hardcore traditional hex encounter type of thing. I think that's why the first BCS game is the Battle of the Bulge. Because the system is tremendously different from anything that we have seen before. But you don't have to expend brain cells working on trying to also understand this new conflict that you happen not to be familiar with. We all know the Battle of the Bulge pretty well, at least at a superficial level at this point.
Yes. One of the interesting things that I discovered researching that the first battles take place on the the first day of Barbarossa, first and second day, and so it's a Panzer Corps attacking into Lithuania, and it was one of the first times that the Germans bumped into T-34s and KV-1s, and it was an unhappy encounter for the Germans, and so to try to model that. the German units start off with like two strength as far as the combat power, which isn't very strong. And most of the Russians are the same way, but that KV unit or the T-34 equipped unit starts off with a 5, so it's more than twice, 2.5, whatever, the firepower that the German tank unit has. But the other aspect of that is each commander then that's in charge of that, they've got their own command ability to go ahead and fight their battle. And a good commander then gets additional dice that they can use. So most of the German commanders, when the German player assigns their best commanders to the tank units, and so you may run into a German tank unit with a commander that gets 2 extra dice, and so they may choose to use the assault dice because they really want to hurt the other unit, or they may choose to put a protection dice because they want to keep this unit going throughout the game. It all depends on what they need to do, but the Russian commander is at a 0 level, so they just fight with their firepower. So they're just using the fact that they've got good tanks, and it's not because they're being used effectively, and it's not because of they've got a good staff. It's just that they've got good tanks. Whereas the German commander, if they put their good commander with that tank unit, is able to have a lot more choices in how they roll the dice and what kind of results they want to get. And that shows the effect that each individual commander has. Those subordinate commanders, you want to put your good commander up against the place that you want to make the biggest impact, and hopefully the commander doesn't get killed in battle, because that's one of the results that can happen in the game as well.
So yeah, that sounds fairly interesting to me as a somebody that gravitates much more toward that exact thing that you described, where you have a wall of counters between you and your opponent's wall of counters. That's an every week experience for me, right? But at the same time, that's a comfortable mechanic, and you're probably not going to try a really experimental mechanic in a huge game like that, right? Because if it doesn't work, then boy, you wasted tons of time, tons of everybody's time.
Right.
So the portability I've had a funny, and I've told this anecdote before, of we were playing Normandy 44, which is not exactly a monster game, right? But it does take all day to play. So there's some folks at the club up in here in Columbus that were like running a pandemic tournament or something like that day. And they were super nice about it. They came up at some point and said, hey, we're going to start the pandemic tournament pretty soon. This is kind of next to all our tables. Are you guys going to be wrapping up soon? Because we'd like to use this table if you are. And we're like, yeah, we should be done in about 7 or 8 hours, right? Yeah. And they looked at us like we were friggin' aliens. And I mean, they weren't mad or anything that we needed the table. They just had to pick a different table, but there was plenty of table space. But the idea of games that take these enormous footprints of space and time to play is something that a lot of people just are unfamiliar with, and they're not comfortable with. So in that sense, I think there's a lot of space for games that play quickly too, which was kind of not a specifically Catastrophe Games oriented piece of commentary, but
well, to add on that, the longest game I ever played, that all my friends know, because I remind the players in this game of this every chance I get. I ended up playing the original version of Civilization from Avalon Hill. My buddy had a bachelor's party, and he said that his biggest wish during the weekend was to play a full count game of Civilization from start to finish. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. This sounds great. Because he never gotten a chance to actually finish a game before, because it's Civilization.
Usually it's 2 a.m. and you just can't take anymore.
Well, we made a solemn vow that we were going to go and start playing after supper, and so I'm I'm playing Egypt, and Egypt has this like exception rules, and I hate exception rules, but Egypt has this exceptional rule, and it's weird that I remember this, but when you hear about it, you'll understand why. that they have to like make 2 cities on their second turn, which in the first few turns of that game happen like boom, boom. You're like 5 minutes in for each turn, even with 6 players, and you're there. And so, like, oh, I forgot that. Can I go back and do that? Oh no, let's play it out and just see how it works out. So I didn't make the epic jump like everyone else there to go to the next level. And so I keep playing the game, hoping someone else doesn't make their jump. Well, 14 and a half hours later, at like 8 o'clock the next morning, turns out nobody else failed it. So I lost the game 5 minutes in to a 14 and a half hour long game. And but I told them that I was going to play it through. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm doing salt trades, trying to like do the math in my head and try to figure it all out. And that was that was a painful experience.
It's not a fast playing game, that's for sure.
No.
There's a new version of it out that is another one of those things that seems to be not obtainable very easily if you're in the United States. But it's a great game. Takes way too long to play for what it is. I actually still have. It's one of my relatively rare games that I still have from when I was a kid. I actually still have my copy of Avalon Hill Civilization. But that is probably the lamest bachelor party story ever. Just FYI.
Yeah, I know.
This is not your typical bachelor party story.
I can go and explain this to my fellow gamers because they are like, "Oh yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah.
No one else though, they get the glazed over look. I'm like, what? Why? Number one, why would you ever play a game that lasts 14 and a half hours? Why would you ever play a game that lasts more than 30 minutes? The only experience they ever have with that is Monopoly, and then they could quit playing. So, yeah.
Well, and that's, I think, the experience of Monopoly actually scares people off of longer games because it's a longer game and it sucks. Yes. So you're like, it's fun for a little while, but then by the time, and bluntly, Talisman is like this too. It's fun for a little while when you get like 1 hour of fun and 3 more hours of abject drudgery. Although Monopoly can play pretty quickly with experienced players, but it's still not fun.
Right.
So, all right. So I would like to ask the chat. We've got about 18 people watching at the moment. Presumably there's a lot of competition from the other Armchair Dragoons events happening right now. If you have any questions for Tim or about Catastrophe games or any of their titles, please ask them now because we're going to be entering the home stretch very, very soon. I will invite everybody to check out the Catastrophe Games website, which I have the link for. It's not in the video description, but because those all broke today. But it's on screen, and it's catastrophegames.net, and they sell stuff from also available on this website are Conflict Simulations Limited, the Historical Game Company, and whoever this folks doing the USS Laffey Association patch are. So, which that's pretty cool, by the way.
Yeah, we're doing a fundraiser for them. So if you do want to go and purchase that, we'll be able to. Mike is going to be going back there this April. So if you are interested, you can go buy one of those, and he'll deliver a check to the Laffey Association and help those guys keep that ship going another year. So they definitely appreciate it.
All right, so Hans says he picked Judean Hammer up from Second Chance Games and played it yesterday for the first time. Sounds like at the ACDC, and he liked it. He says it's also a game you can use to introduce war games to a non-war gamer, which lines up with what I'm seeing as well. I can tell you that there's a couple of things that I'm super interested in here, and I need to get pushed to the top of the acquisitions list. This is Mike is right about Monopoly. If you don't, everybody plays with the free parking rule, but it is a lot faster if you don't, because people go bankrupt very readily without a source of large windfalls of cash showing up on their doorstep every so often. But I literally haven't played Monopoly in probably 20 years. But I mean, everybody wanted to play with the free parking money.
I had to play that with my girls because I figured they're going to get asked about Monopoly. So, because they'll say, "Is it like Monopoly?"
That's true. Yeah.
The common
my mom's been dealing with this for 50 years now, and she still asks questions like that. Is that like Monopoly?
So
Yeah.
we played the game. We used we didn't use the money on free parking. Um, I was sincerely hoping that because of that, it would go nice and smooth, and it took forever. We had to play like across 3 nights, and my kids still were like, "I will never play that game again." And and if it was like a
I assume
fast
that was the
build,
intended lesson.
not really, because there's parts of Monopoly that's kind of cool, and but no, we got done with that, and like we all looked at each other like, yeah, we're not playing this again. Um, and it's not like they won't play a long game. I mean, we're like 10 games into the King's Dilemma. I don't know if you heard of that one, but you act as counselors for a fantasy king, and each time you have a card, you open up a card, it gives you a dilemma. Should we vote aye or nay? And you also have your secret agenda, and so you might want to vote nay on this, or you might want to vote aye, and the other person does. And anyhow, they played that for 10 times now to try to get through this. So long games don't necessarily scare them away, but they have no interest in playing Monopoly again. So,
Well, send him down here. We'll get him playing Case Blue.
hey, speaking of which,
love it.
I'm working with new designer Martin Melbardis from Canada, and we got a game coming up called Campaign Fall Blau, Case Blue. And it is a 1 hour long solitaire version of that campaign. And I have had a lot of fun. That is probably my favorite solitaire game to play. You're turning over cards, and you're moving up your core generals to try to figure out where you're going to which aspect of the campaign you're going to attack next. And the key thing that you're trying to manipulate is, can you keep the attacks going before the winter snows come in? And sometimes you just have to halt because you need more supplies, which is pretty typical to how that campaign went. So I'm really enjoying that. I hope to get that game out this year. And he is working on a follow-on to that for Bagration, which is, turnaround is fair play.
The operation
so
no one knows how to properly pronounce.
There you go. However it's pronounced.
Me.
So I'm looking forward to seeing that one too. And then I've got, I'm not sure if I'm going to keep the title for this or not. The designer called it Scarper. Ben, designer from the Netherlands, and his game is the Western Front in World War One, and it's kind of plays like a coin, card-driven game. But what you're doing is you're manipulating the front line. So where the front line is, the more it's on your side, the more the other guy gets victory points because he's pushing against you, and then you can add cubes that represent the trenches. And as you watch as the game progresses, how trenches start building up and how you deal with that. That's been fun too, because again, that's another game that plays in about maybe an hour, just over an hour. And my kid, my 17-year-old daughter, she likes to play it, which is, she doesn't like to play a lot of historical games, but we played that probably 3 or 4 times, and she enjoys it. So I think that's kind of cool too.
That's pretty cool. Hans also said play Food Chain Magnate instead of Monopoly. I can't personally vouch for that. So John Longshore mentions Raccoon Tycoon, which is that a video game? I don't even know. Anyway, so I would like to thank, we're going to wrap it up here. I would like to thank everybody who stopped by during the interview. I'd like to thank Tim from Catastrophe Games for stopping by. Once again, please do check out their website at catastrophegames.net. I'm sure, Tim, do you have a next thing that's going up on Kickstarter that you'd like to mention before we sign off?
Probably our next one will be Stonewall Uprising, the struggle for gay civil rights, which may not be not a war game. After that,
it depends who you ask.
That's true. It all depends which art I can get done the fastest. Because rules wise, Scarper and Campaign Fall Blau and to some degree Joe Schmidt's game, the San Juan Hill game, they're all pretty much done. I just can't kick the art out fast enough. So whichever one of those gets done first, will be another Kickstarter coming up. Hopefully, before the summer. I think I could have like 3 or 4 of them that I've got running. Boom, 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 boom. Closing out the rest of the year. Hopefully, get them done before I run into the Hollandspiel mass sale in the end of November that clogs Steve up so that he can't do anything until January, like I keep running into. But I'm learning, each year I learn a little bit more about how this works. So I'm trying to make sure I don't run into that known log jam that I know is going to come up here in the fall.
You going to be coming to Origins this year again?
Yes, I will be. In
Outstanding.
fact, I put in a double booth. So
bigger. Wait,
yeah.
Hopefully they won't put you in the back corner again.
Who knows? Who knows what'll happen? I just, with a double booth, then Steve at Blue Panther can display his wares, and Steve needs some space to move around, so he'll have that space there, and then I'll be able to have hopefully for Zermatt and maybe Judean Hammer, maybe Stonewall, and then also an opportunity to have a couple other games we'd like folks to take a look at. So yes, you will find us at Origins.
I will run you down at that time if we don't talk before then. So
that sounds great.
Again, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. I'd like to thank Brant from the Armchair Dragoons and the rest of the Armchair Dragoons. Believe it or not, it's not just Brant. Brant's just got the biggest mouth for setting up this long-awaited opportunity. So, and once again, thanks to Tim Densham for sitting down with us at this time. Everybody Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.